Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 24th day of October, in the year of our Lord 2025. I will be talking about the military actions taken by President Trump against the nation of Venezuela, as well as some other South and Latin American nations. I argue that there is more involved in these actions than an effort to stop drug trafficking, and also assert that countering the import of narcotics into the United States is at best a side benefit of the action against those countries. The original Monroe Doctrine has been the policy of the United States for a little over 200 years, but it has been more or less abandoned in recent years. Is Donald Trump trying to reassert that doctrine with his military efforts in the Western Hemisphere? I think he is, and I will make my case today. First, let's look at the Monroe Doctrine and what it was originally intended to be. It was first formulated, or at least spoken of, by President James Monroe in 1823 during his State of the Union address to Congress. He laid out before Congress a foreign policy position that opposed European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere. Essentially, he just told the Europeans that at the time, Spain was the primary nation, the primary focus of the doctrine. He told them that we will leave you alone in Europe and not interfere in your affairs in return. This hemisphere is off limits to you. Intervention in the affairs of nations in this hemisphere by foreign powers would potentially, he said, be treated as a hostile act against the United States. This doctrine was the grand foreign policy strategy during the 19th century. The Spanish-American War at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th was a capstone or high watermark of that policy when the United States removed Spain from its last two remaining colonies in this hemisphere. The 20th century brought with it two world wars and an America victorious, willing to intervene anywhere at any time it wanted to. Instead of non-intervention in European affairs, the U.S. now has in the neighborhood of 750 military bases on foreign soil all over the world. The doctrine has been argued about and debated since the Spanish-American War, but now everything's different, far more dangerous because of nuclear weapons and the reality that one mistake by one psychopathic leader could unleash a worldwide catastrophe. We also have a new war called the War on Drugs. That war has been raging since President Nixon declared it in the early 1970s. That war has been fought, lost, fought again since then by almost every president since Nixon. Every president at least pays lip service to stopping the scourge of drugs coming into the United States. It seems that each time one drug is somewhat controlled, a new, even worse drug takes its place. Cocaine, fentanyl, other synthetic opioids are examples. Unlike other presidents, Trump seems to be approaching the problem as an actual war rather than just using war as a turn of phrase. He has stated that the U.S. is in a, quote, non-international armed conflict, end quote, with drug cartels he is designated as terrorist organizations. The Trump administration delivered that notice to Congress after a strike on an alleged drug boat from Venezuela. There have been several strikes since then, all against supposed drug boats. The scene is usually a high-speed boat carrying several people speeding across the Caribbean when a drone unleashes a Hellfire missile and the boat and all its contents disappears. Designating a group as a terrorist organization is more than just saying we don't like those people anymore. It deprives that group of many of the niceties of American law, such as due process of law, and its proponents argue that it permits the non-judicial killing of members of that group. You may recall President Obama used it when he used to analyze and revise his kill list each Tuesday morning. He used it to kill an American citizen named Anwar al-Awlaki somewhere, I believe, North Africa, perhaps Somalia. He took a lot of heat for killing an American citizen without due process, but he just said he's a member of ISIS, so he's fair game. That's a designated terrorist organization. So that's how it works, folks. If you're a member of an organization designated as terrorist, you are fair game. That's why designating Antifa as a terrorist organization is so significant, and why a few of the group's members have apparently fled the country. So an actual shooting war is being conducted against the drug cartels, who are, of course, terrorists. The President of the United States has not limited his invectives to the cartels, but he extended the attacks to include the leaders of other countries, at least with words. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has accused President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela of heading up one of the world's most notorious drug trafficking operations. She said his involvement in the drug trade is a direct threat to the national security of the United States. Quote, he is one of the largest narco traffickers in the world, a threat to our national security. Therefore, we've doubled his reward to $50 million, end quote. Yes, folks, the United States has officially, through its chief lawyer, its chief attorney general, put a reward on the life of a leader of a foreign country. It has long been rumored or suspected that the drug cartels pay the leaders of South and Latin American countries in drugs, such as cocaine, instead of cash. That policy, if true, converts the leaders into drug traffickers because they must deliver the drugs to the end users here in the United States, thus the drug bugs. The administration said its report to Congress was required by the National Defense Authorization Act after the U.S. conducts a military attack. The terrorist designation includes several known cartels, such as Venezuela's Tren de Aragua, Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, El Salvador's MS-13. The report also said the drugs smuggled by these organizations kill tens of thousands of Americans each year and constitute a, quote, armed attack against U.S. citizens. The U.S. forces remain positioned to carry out operations as necessary to prevent further deaths or injuries to American citizens by eliminating the threat posed by these terrorist-designated organizations. So, in furtherance of that goal, the U.S. has positioned a very powerful array of its armed forces in the Caribbean, including many warships. Keep in mind, folks, these ships are not Coast Guard cutters, but Navy warships, and on those ships, otherwise deployed, are some 11,000 U.S. military personnel. The president also announced that he has authorized the CIA to conduct operations inside Venezuela. That is, in addition to 8 warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, several B-52 strategic bombers, and several fighter jets. This display of military power is supposedly due to drug smuggling and illegal immigration in the United States. When I hear that, I raise an eyebrow because it makes no sense. There is an economic term called ROI, which is return on investment. I don't see how this investment can be returned profitably if that is the only reason. Recently, the admiral who commanded the Central Command, or Southcom, Admiral Alvin Halsey, resigned from his position. Perhaps he had doubts about the legality of what he was being ordered to do. But the reason for his resignation is publicly unknown. The term resignation, used by an officer of general rank, is very significant because such officers simply do not resign. It just isn't done. If he wanted to leave the service, he would instead announce his retirement. And if the Navy was not in desperate need of his service, his retirement would be approved. A serving officer, especially one of general rank, has no right to resign without approval. The military in which he serves could reject his resignation, but the Navy did not do that. His resignation, effective December 1st, I believe, was quickly accepted. The whole process that transpired is very revealing, but of what? No one is saying. I know one thing, that is that his leaving his position was apparently welcomed by the Navy. So what in the world is going on down there in South America? Let's take a look at some possibilities. I personally don't think for a minute this military display, with all its threats, is for the purpose of fighting a drug war. That part of it, if anything, is simply a side benefit. No, I think this is a reimposition of the Monroe Doctrine, and this time it's not directed at Europe, but at China. President Trump is telling China the Western Hemisphere is ours. We control it, so stay away. Maduro in Venezuela, Gustavo Petro In Colombia, our own noticed that the U.S. is not going to permit China to continue dominating the economies and militaries of those countries. To Trump, apparently that may require enacting regime change by force in those countries. There is an island just off the coast of Venezuela called Margarita Island, known colloquially as Terror Island because it is a training base for Middle East terror groups. I first heard of what was allegedly happening there on that island from a report by Glenn Beck, who reported it on his podcast, and I started looking at it and researching it. Yes, folks, yes, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis are alive and well, allegedly off the coast of Venezuela. These people are apparently trained, equipped, sent back to the Middle East to lead and conduct terror campaigns, and of course, some are transported into the U.S. If that were all, folks, it would be plenty. But as usual, it gets worse. Venezuela in particular, but Colombia also, are two countries with some of the largest deposits of petroleum and other valuable minerals on Earth. Right now, the benefit of all that oil, rare earth minerals, etc., is going to China, and Trump wants to see that change. Using his usual method of negotiating, he offers them the carrot and the stick. The stick is a $50 million bounty on the head of their leader, as well as ships full of U.S. Marines off their near shore. The CIA doing what it does in their cities. The carrot is that all of this display of what we can do to you goes away if you just do two things that are obviously in your own best interest. Stop training terrorists. Sell us your oil and minerals in return. Your people will no longer live in poverty. Your medical system will no longer be non-existent. Your leaders will be friends of the U.S. instead of having bounties on their heads. Finally, folks, tensions are escalating, and apparently none of these leaders will back down until it's too late. The U.S. appears to be on the verge of airstrikes inside Venezuela. Perhaps full-scale war can still be averted, but we will have to wait and see. As you are painfully aware, folks, I'm opposed to non-defensive regime change wars. At least that's the way I see it. Till next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.